And we're live. We're back for another episode of the Food Web podcast. This is episode number 10. So if you're tuning in on LinkedIn or Instagram, then you're tuning in live. And if you're not, then you're listening to our show afterwards on YouTube or Spotify. So if you're listening on one of those channels, drop us a like. Why? Because we all eat. And if you eat, which I think you might, then we want to help other people eat because a lot of people aren't eating. They're either not eating well or not eating at all. And that's a problem. That's a problem that here at FoodWeb, we're pretty driven to solving that problem. And yeah, so today's episode is about mushrooms. Why mushrooms exactly? We're gonna get into that. We're gonna get real deep into that. It's quite the tangle, quite the mess, but it's a good mess. It's the good kind of mess. That's what mushrooms represent. They're really special to us here at FoodWeb. They represent a lot. There's a lot of symbology there. There's a lot of history with mushrooms between myself, Keegan, and Justin. So I'm happy to go anywhere with this conversation. I'm not exactly sure where to start because the topic of mushrooms is huge, but I'll let Justin chime in here and maybe seed the first part of the conversation, and then we'll just take it where we go.
All right. Yeah, this one is a special one for us. And I have 5 words to start us off with, both in terms of a personal, like just me as a human, Justin, life philosophy, and a food web company philosophy. So those 5 words are: the mushrooms run the show. The mushrooms run the show. Third time, the mushrooms run the show. The mushrooms inform our strategy. The mushrooms inform our philosophy, our ethos, just and my consciousness works for the mushrooms. And I'll get into that. We'll unpack what that means if that sounds crazy. But Justin Andrews' brain made a soul contract with the mycelial consciousness about a decade ago, and they've given me a vision. And what you might label like my personal vision is not my vision. Like, it's a vision that was given to me by the mushroom consciousness to execute on planet Earth. So you'll see our logo is 3 fruiting mushrooms, but the roots, they're not roots, they're mycelium. And if anybody listening is not familiar with what mycelium is, mycelium in some ways is the root system of mushrooms, to compare like plants have roots. But in that fungal world, the mycelium is the organism. Like what we call a mushroom, the fruiting body, that's just the reproductive organ of that organism. It popped up. It's like the seed pod. It's the fruit where the seeds are, the spores. But the actual organism, the intelligence, is the mycelium. So in many ways, the mycelium runs the show. I say the mushrooms run the show because it's more approachable and more people are aware. But that's why our logo is what our logo is. It's this fruiting of this consciousness, but it's this rooted interconnectedness that the mushrooms demonstrate and the mushrooms teach us. I'll pass it back to Keegan maybe to hear, but yeah, the mushrooms run the show here at FoodWeb and in just the day-to-day of how I navigate my life.
The mushrooms run the show, Justin. I love it. So there's only about 17 things that popped into my mind here from your intro. So I'm going to try and keep it straight here, but I actually love that you started from square one, which is what is a mushroom? Okay. Not everyone might be aware of how special this piece of the life kingdom is, right? We've got the fungal kingdom is its own kingdom. It's actually not part of the plant kingdom. And then we've got the animal kingdom, which humans are a part of. And we're closer to mushrooms than we are plants. Like evolution, as far as evolution goes, yeah, we're a closer relative to mushrooms, right? They breathe oxygen just like we do and exhale carbon dioxide and lock it during their lifetime. And you can just have so many connections with mushrooms on so many levels. It's easy to relate to them once you start to understand them as a species, as a genus. Okay, a couple things came to mind. Like when you were saying the mushrooms run the show, my mind went to Dennis and Terrence McKenna, and I forget which one of them exactly said this, but I think it was Dennis McKenna, and he wasn't on mushrooms at the time. He took
Time.
ayahuasca at the time. But he was telling a story about connecting to some sort of source intelligence, and he was in a communion with them, and the conversation they were having was that you silly monkeys, you think you're in control, you're not in control, we're in control. And it was like the plant intelligence speaking that to him. And right, if you've ever had the courage to embark on a sacred journey with this holy sacrament, then you'll understand A, why we're using this language, B, what I'm talking about. What's this guy talking about? He's talking about having a conversation with a mushroom and the plant kingdom. This is nuts, right? No, it's not actually. Like thousands, if not millions of people every year have this exact experience, and there's more things at play than what we might be aware of. That's what that means to me when I say silly monkeys. Like you only think you're in control. It looks like we're in control, but let's unpack exactly how mushrooms are constantly supporting us, driving us, changing us, prodding us, nudging us. You're a prime example when you say that the mushrooms have given you a vision to execute. Is that your control? That you like, did you say I accept this mission, or was it like ordained that you need to be on this mission? You see where I'm going with that?
I do. Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. I think let's just talk a little bit more about why mushrooms are so special and how they're holding it down out there. Like mushrooms have our back. Mycelium has our back. So these mycelial threads are like these like thin hair, like thinner than hair, depending on the species of mushroom. And in 1 square foot of soil, there could be like kilometers and kilometers worth of these threads. And different species of mushrooms operate in different ways. But to generalize a little bit, these underground networks, there's electrical communications moving through them. There are nutrient highways underground, like minerals and sugars are being moved through these networks. And many species of mushrooms will form symbiotic relationships with different trees and plants. And if it weren't for those mycelial networks underground, like certain trees wouldn't get the nutrient and things would build up in a certain area and become toxic, but the mushroom digests that and moves it and distributes it. And there's an intelligence at play there. And, you know, bacteria and microbes and yeast also have their role. They're also doing their part. There's this underworld city, right? So if you imagine, let's look at New York. Okay. You have a bunch of people that live in New York. They have to put their garbage out on garbage day. That garbage needs to be taken somewhere, right? Like, if that didn't happen, it'd be really bad. Like the coordination layer, right? Like in New York, there's an office somewhere that decides what day of the week is garbage week. That's the mycelium, right? That coordination layer for the soil, for Pachamama, for the earth is the mycelium. And to some extent, I truly believe that there is some sort of like higher level of intelligence at play for that. I believe the earth has a consciousness. When I think of what God is, what people call God is a earth-based collective intelligence that coordinates this exchange, that is maybe even at some way directing the flow in which evolution is taking place. I believe in evolution, but I think it needs to be directed or initiated or steered at times for certain things to happen. So, yeah, like the mushrooms are like the internet of the earth. They're the coordination layer. And food web is being built as the coordination layer for small and medium scale food systems to be able to collaborate and grow and compete against the megalith food companies that have their own proprietary softwares to be as big as they are. The little guys don't have that coordination layer. So long-winded way, mushrooms are the internet of the earth. And this is where the philosophy of food web was born out of.
Epic. Yeah, there's a bunch to respond to there. So first, yes, food web, we're building food web in the mushrooms image, the mushroom and mycelium networks image. And I want to touch on that element of spirituality and God that you brought into the equation here. I also believe that there's an earth consciousness that, so the Amazon rainforest, for example, is often spoken of as the lungs of the earth, right? And just to bring it down to the human level for a moment, you've got trillions of bacteria in your stomach right now. Do you think that they're aware that they're a part of a human being?
I do.
And do you think that they have individual do you think that they have individual agency though? And do you think that they're aware of their jobs, and do they talk about their own economy in your digestive system? You know what I mean? Oh, is this guy gonna make it? Are we gonna make it, or is he gonna nuke us? Are we gonna nuke ourselves? Do you think that they have
100%.
those conversations? Right?
They
Because we're
do.
having those conversations about the earth. And so for me, it's actually really not that much of a stretch to conceptualize of a consciousness that's far beyond us in scale, that operates at a much higher level. Like another way of saying that would be, do you think the individual ant is aware that it's in a hive mind and it gets orders from the queen, or do you think it just executes its will with like somewhat blindly, as like in pursuit of the queen's vision, right? Like, what are your thoughts there? And
I
back
I
to the
think
mushroom.
something
You
I
take
think
the orders from the
something
mushroom, right?
so I think something like an ant might just be a program. Like humans write a script, right? We're designing an AI bot to go do stuff for us, right? Like an ant might just be a hive mind bot to execute a task to move resources from one place or another. And the consciousness, the sentience might be at a different level. I think like sophisticated consciousness of which like humans have in terms of perceived agency and self might not be in every being. Like some beings get that and other beings don't, but there's still a behind the scenes coordination layer play. Like I believe in like a background, whether you want to call that God or collective consciousness, whatever. But as you're talking about the bacteria, so there's a guy named Sandor Cat, and he's one of the most renowned fermentation specialists, like huge mentor of mine. Like I'm almost in tears thinking of this man. Like in one of his books, he describes the human body as a planet. Okay. And like my armpit versus my forearm is the difference between a rainforest and the desert. Like literally, like it's dry here and there's no hair. And here it's like I have sweaty pits. It's the rainforest. And there are different bacteria and that live on my body in different continental capacities, right? And who's to say that a bacteria on Justin didn't build a telescope that's looking through their telescope at Keegan, and they don't know if there's intelligent life on Keegan because they've never been able to build a rocket ship to travel to Keegan. But Keegan's one of those people that would be like a moon in my world. Like I see Keegan enough, that other celestial body gets close pretty soon. My mom, my dad, right? Like I have my own solar system because I have these key people in my life that are around more often than others. The orbital pattern of others is different. But the other thing is, as above, so below, as within, so without. So we can look inward and see the similarities and the overlaps of these different terrains and speculate on if bacteria on planet Justin are sentient or not. You can also do the same thing looking outward, right? I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast years ago, and I don't remember the name of the guy that was on the podcast, but he was describing a vision he had of zooming out and trying to explore outward. And it's okay, like Earth, solar system, Milky Way, blah, blah, blah. And then it's okay, but what is this thing that's expanding? And the vision was a beating heart in a Titan running around an Olympic track. The Big Bang, like we're in, like our conceptualization of time is only that we're in an expansion, but then it contracts and then it expands and then it contracts and then it expands and it contracts. And we are just living on a planet in a galaxy that is inside a cell in a heart of some great being, just training for the Super Titan Olympics, right? And so in some ways, I think it's magnificent to speculate what's inner, what's out. I also live in a way where it doesn't matter to me. Like maybe we're the center of it all, maybe we're not. I spend most of my time focused on the here and now. Like we live on a beautiful, habitable planet with flamingos and pomegranates and palm trees and coconuts, and like life is lit. Like we live in the Garden of Eden. Like a fundamental philosophy of mine is that we already live in the Garden of Eden. The rich people know it and they take advantage of the working class to serve them in the Garden of Eden. And we're here to burn that hierarchy down and allow all of humanity to rejoice in the magic that is consciousness in the human form and celebrate that.
Yo, okay, so yeah, yes to all of that. I like how you started at the micro, you went up to the macro, you planted a nice quote in there, as within, so without, as above, so below. All of those concepts are things that I ascribe to and like use to bring meaning in my daily life. Like sometimes when you have these macroscopic conversations with folks, they might say something along the lines of, so what? You just kind of freak me out by zooming out. Like there's a nihilism there, right? Oh, it's too big, nothing matters anyway. But I think you did a good job of honing it back in and recentering it around like the present moment. And I'd like to add to that. And the way I'd like to add to that is, again, by invoking the image of the mushroom. And it's like this supportive element of our ecosystem. And like it transports nutrients. It facilitates electric communication between not only its like members of its own fungal species, but also trans-electric communication between other mushrooms, not of its own species, and plants of all types and forms, and probably insects and bacteria. So when you say it's a communication layer and a data layer, yes, it's all of those things and more. And there's a term here, it's called biomimicry. And it's the idea of building things after the image of nature, right? Nature. How long has it been at the game of designing things? It's been at the game of designing things for as long as we've been around, which I grew up being taught that the Big Bang makes the universe 13.8 billion years. And I'm now being told that no, we've got some telescopes and some maths that say the universe is older than that. It's okay, whatever. Doesn't matter. The point is that nature optimizes, like it's a environment optimizer for that which lives in the environment. If you're existing in the now moment, you're the apex of everything that's come before you. And so that includes the mushroom. And so I laugh when we design things as humans, like we invent things that kind of go against naturalistic principles. It's really obvious when we do that. Like when we have a factory that dumps sludge into a river and then the river turns black and the fish die. It's like, oh, we didn't really pay attention to, like, nature doesn't do that. Mushrooms don't do that. So the idea that I want us to
Mushrooms would dilute
yeah,
and
go ahead.
spread the poison and be like, we can't have too much here. We put it over there and over there and distribute the resources. Don't concentrate the resources. Don't put too much of the same thing in one place. It's just not good.
Yeah, I want us to explore that idea actually, and I want to invoke somewhat of a controversial term here in order to seed the conversation a little bit with controversy. Capitalism is a word that people don't like a lot of the time, and to me, it's a word, and what it means to me. Actually, I look for capitalistic principles in nature, and where I find it most is mushrooms. Mushrooms to me have emulated an ideal capitalistic society system. Like, I don't personally believe that the economic model that we have operating on this planet that so often is labeled capitalism, I don't think that what we have right now is capitalism. I think if we went out and defined it and then looked for it in nature, we would find it operating in mycelium cultures, meaning mycelium, like just that pollution example that you just gave, is an example of how mushrooms would handle the problem of concentrated resources or concentrated pollutants or concentrated anything, right? Mycelium networks, by definition, are decentralized networks. Decentralized networks are strong, resilient networks. You can cut a chunk of that network off and the whole thing still survives. That's not the way that our society is set up. We're not set up to be the most resilient. We're actually extremely centralized in many areas. Like, to continue my controversial rant here, it's that's more characteristic of socialism. I don't mean that as a critique. I just mean that in a literal, that is, like, socialism centralizes power, and in a perfect capitalistic society, you would have decentralized power and resources. And like, I'm just trying to take my words as not as like a reading of how I feel about these terms, but as a literal, this is how these things are defined in a dictionary if you were to go look them up. I really don't want to polarize that way. I'm just trying to talk about that biomimicry of what we see in mushrooms and what we could take away from mushrooms and apply to how we choose to design our systems and our businesses. That's why the food web is designed the way it is. We're trying to biomimic mushrooms and a mycelium network.
Yeah, and I want to sink in a little bit more on the controversy around capitalism, because if you've tuned into the Food Web podcast before, you know that Keegan and I love financial literacy and broadening our vocabulary and the nuance around how we talk about the economy. It's really important, especially with just the division we have on, like, in two-party systems around economic policy. Like, we need to flesh that out a little bit. When I look at somewhere like the United States, that is one of the more capitalistic in nature. Okay, let me put it this way. We're a Canadian business. I'll rewind. We're a Canadian business and we need money to go and do what we want to do. In a country like Canada, where there's only 5 big banks and like a couple credit unions in different provinces, like, we don't have diversity in places you can go and get money for your idea, right? If for all the people that hate capitalism, it's, do you hate your local restaurant? Do you hate your local farm? Those are people that own the means of production and have employees. Like, businesses are the backbone of our culture, right? The private sector creates 80% of the jobs, right? The public sector is there to coordinate, but what creating this stimuli, I don't want a fully socialized economy. I want somebody to be able to say, I have an idea for an epic restaurant and I'm going to start that and I'm going to invest my time and my resources and then I'm going to hire people. And if that person pays minimum wage versus a living wage, that's a different conversation. But the mechanism of action, the ability to even do that, is capitalism. A person with an idea and agency to do that has the ability to go and do that. And they can knock on the door. And if you want to unpack how in the past, for example, Black people were denied mortgages and loans. So their ability to play capitalism was limited historically, maybe in some regions still today. But that's not capitalism. That's the systems adjacent to capitalism that are restricting certain people access. That's not capitalism doing that. Those are other systems. So to use the Canada example, I have an idea for a business and I need to get a loan to get started. My options for that are very limited. In the United States, there's just so many different banks. Like, you have options. There's creative, different options. Is there still in the way? Yes, I'm not saying it's easy, guys, but the ability for somebody to just want to start something and go and ask to borrow money and do it, that allows more social mobility than many other human systems have ever allowed. If we control and restrict on how people can get resources like you have in other countries, the ability to start businesses is harder in some countries than others. But in a world like America, as much as some of the shit they're up to is just the fact that you have this diversity of banks and diversity of funding sources and a willingness to invest in ideas, that actually awesome. And if you're looking at a true definition of capitalism, like I like it. I like to identify as an anarcho-capitalist, like combining capitalism with anarchy, get the government out of the way, less regulations, like environmental, keep them, but allow people to just start stuff.
Yeah, rules, not rulers. That's when I hear anarcho-capitalism, that's what I hear. I think we may be all able to agree that rulers throughout history tend to have found themselves in corruptive places. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We can talk about what that actual mechanism of power is that does corrupt. Is it wielding the law in the judicial system? Is it money printing? Is it having a military in control and actually using violence? All three of those things, I think, are power structures that corrupt. We're fallible. We're humans, right? So the American answer to that human realization that we're fallible and not any individual one of us can be trusted with absolute power, like that's actually a pretty important realization. And I think that comes out of nature. Like, where in nature can you point to any centralization of force, money printing, and military action, right? You can't. Nature doesn't do that. It's never done it. So even there, so you were talking about like, where are the problems? Like, we can have that conversation. I just pointed to three of them, right? Military, I would love to like not need it. Money printing, I personally view that as a lie. I think you're lying when you print money. I think it's actually like a lie at the root of our financial system. And let's just hone in on that one for a moment so that we can talk about how mushrooms deal with currency, because money, power, and capitalism also they all get lumped into the same conversation a lot of the time in the same thread. But if you pull them apart and let's take it into the context of mushrooms, currency is just a way for us to exchange goods with one another. It solves the coincidence of wants. If I'm an apple salesman, how many apples equal a house? No idea. No one knows. It's just that I can sell my apples for money and then I can pool my money and save it and then buy a house later, right? I don't need to trade you my apples for a house. I can use money instead. It solves a really awesome problem. Mushrooms don't really do that. They don't have this currency, but they actually do have an economy built. That's when you're invoking the notion that mushrooms have an intelligence built into them when they're facilitating this trade of resources amongst the connected network of organisms that it's facilitating. And it does that. It does calculations. Like, the actual studies have been done on this. There's some math and numbers, and mushrooms are like, okay, that spot over there needs more nitrogen, and over here needs more phosphorus, and like that tree over there, we got to go support that thing because some limbs have been cut off of it, and we need to go like throw some resources that way. So there's even like a little bit of that socialist element in there, like operating, and it's like the perfect mix. Why is it the perfect mix? And I don't use the word perfect too flippantly. It's the perfect mix because nature is doing it, right? I have to like operate at the assumption that if I'm seeing something demonstrated in nature, it's undergirded by like it being the apex of happening. Let's say.
I just want to add another layer to that though, because nature sometimes may also decide that we need to cut resources to this tree because it's just not going to work out anymore. And we're going to kill you. So it's, if we're looking at the mushroom economy and like if we're going to anthropomorphize like some sort of like human parallel government system, political structure, like there's a level of, oh no, like you're inefficient and I'm going to execute you because we're just going to take you out and we're going to compost you. And we're like, then 7 more species of mushroom shows up to eat this dying tree and just bring it back to the earth. It's there's one element of being human where it's like we're not 100% being conducted by nature. Like we have this like a little bit of agency. Like a tree can't move, right? So if the mushroom consciousness decides that this tree is done with because it's just not working anymore, like that tree doesn't have any agency to be like, shit, man, like I had a good run. Like I was hoping I'd make it to 300, but I'm not gonna anymore. And so
It also can't lobby. It
right,
can't, like, I think of Doge and how like America just cut a bunch of programs that it perceived to not be working, right? And that's where my mind goes. You've got a bunch of disgruntled people, and yes, we've anthropomorphized this conversation to such a degree where I'm so glad that you added that layer, because nature is ruthless. It does not care at all about like saving that tree if that tree is not vibing with the rest of the nature, right? There might be a newer, better, younger, stronger, fitter tree right next to it. And it's just like, yeah, but that tree, it's gonna grow and it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be a home to all these plants, and you're getting eaten by termites. So we're gonna let you get eaten by termites. But the nature element of that is we're gonna deconstruct you and make you a part of everything else, right? And like, even with that example of nature being ruthless, there is like the compassion of we're going to assimilate your parts into other areas. Totally think we lost that narrative with the whole Doge thing and like assimilating the fragments of everything that got chopped into other constructive elements of the economy. But I'm super glad that you brought that in, because it invokes the idea of what are humans? What are we doing here? Are we transcending nature, or are we deluded in thinking that we are?
so what came to me there was a very simple summary comparing humans to mushrooms. Okay, you ready for this? Humans and mushrooms both seek efficiencies. Would you agree? This
I
is where I'm
agree.
going with that. Okay. But when mushrooms seek efficiencies, the resource gain from identifying and implementing that efficiency are distributed across a network. Whereas when humans identify efficiencies, the resource gain tends to be concentrated with the person that identified that efficiency, and it's not being redistributed. So your example with Doge in the US cutting all these things, like I think some of that was some of it was hype, some of it was fake news, and some of it actually was, wow, we're wasting money over here. Let's just not do that. But then if you've identified a way to stop wasting money, does that mean like more schools, better healthcare, more food on people's plates, subsidizing the agriculture industry, et cetera, et cetera? Or does it mean backdoor deals making politicians rich? And we know the answer to that question. So I just think that's like the high level difference, is that human consciousness is always, it's, oh man, inefficiency, cool, build solution. We have that wiring in us, but in a greed based winner takes all society, those inefficiencies aren't being distributed. But the mushroom isn't greedy. It's not, the mushroom is a network. It's not this individual thing. It's not being like, yeah, I'm keeping all the phosphorus, yo. I like, see all this phosphorus. I have the most phosphorus. Phosphorus is the coolest thing ever. Don't you like phosphorus? No, it's just put it everywhere. Like we had to take this tree down and let's like even put the phosphorus everywhere. So that's really what we're trying to do at FoodWeb, is build the infrastructure to allow like everybody to have access to all the stuff. And anybody that's listening to this audio only, please go watch the video, because I did a thing with my arms that like you really need to see, because it's explaining how this is all working.
It's articulating the tangle of mycelium. And there's like, I was reading that mycelium can connect resources across vast distances. I'm not talking about a couple feet. Like, I'm talking about kilometers, miles, and not like 1 mile, like miles and miles, tens, if not hundreds of miles. I think this is a fact that's like usually brought up in the context of mushrooms. The largest organism on the planet, what is it? Not a whale. It's actually a mushroom. It's like a singular mushroom. Where is it? It's in Nevada, Arizona, Idaho. It spans like 3/4 states in Western, and that's the biggest mushroom that we know of. I bet there's a bigger one somewhere in the Amazon rainforest. But like that thing, actually, I'm contradicting myself here. Does that sound like a centralized source here? Does that sound like a centralized element? If it does, I'll ask you to zoom in. It's one organism, but it's made up of a decentralized network. Okay. Like how Bitcoin is one thing, but it's made up of a decentralized network. You can chop that largest organism, that mushroom, in half, and both parts will survive. And that's a beautiful thing. If you chop the United States in half, there's gonna be a winner.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're gonna work it
No,
out.
totally. And it's the way that humans, like, if you want to transport oil from point A to point B, you need to build a pipeline. And if you cut that in half, you have an oil spill and oil's not getting to point B anymore, right? Mushrooms don't move resources in as big of a flow. You don't have just like one giant pipeline. You have 117,000 micro pipelines moving it around. So to any degree that it's centralized, it's still a distributed network. And can you, like, with your tech brain, just explain a distributed network? Because I get it, but I don't know if I can explain it. But I think that's a really important concept, just the way that like blockchain is underpinned and like what we're doing at FoodWeb.
Yeah, a distributed network would be made up. I'm going to use the word node, but node just means place, okay, or actor or entity. So a mycelium network is made up of many nodes. A node would be where a fruiting body or a particularly dense area of this mycelial network lives. Your brain is a distributed network, right? You can actually chop out several parts of your brain without having the whole brain die. You can have parts of your brain go through necrosis without having the whole organism die. That's a distributed network. Let's take the internet for an example. That's a distributed network. It's made up of millions of nodes around the planet. And you can take any one of those nodes out of the network and have the whole network still remain intact and perform its vital function. So that's actually the key of what makes up a distributed network. A distributed network has a function. Okay, what is the function of the internet? It's an information transport mechanism. It's a giant machine. It's the biggest machine that humans have ever created on this planet. It does one thing. It transports information. And we've got all of these other applications on top of this information sharing network, this information sharing distributed system that are all unlocked. All of these applications get unlocked by building this decentralized system. If let's just imagine for a moment that all of the information on the internet had to go through a bottleneck, had to go through one centralized node, right? Who owns that node? Who gets to decide? Then you have this uber potent mechanism for controlling the information that gets back out of that system, right? Information in, let's say you can put in any information into this thing, but then someone, usually some small group, gets to control that filter of what comes out the other side. That's bad. That's in general, that's bad. That's sometimes needed, like on the micro scale, but in general on the macro scale, like that's what causes systems to fail, right? Because let's just say you bomb that place, then the whole internet goes down forever. Like you don't recover from like a downed central point of failure. If it's a central point of failure, it's done. That's the end of the story for that thing. So the most resilient systems that we've ever built have been the ones that are decentralized. Our telecommunication network that we built 50, 60 years ago as humans, decentralized. The internet, decentralized. Our supply chain that drives the deliverance of goods and services all around the planet, it's decentralized. You can take any one laundromat out of the equation and you can still get your clothes laundered. No problem. So we naturally build decentralized systems. Yeah, I would say it's actually a perversion to centralize sometimes. In most cases, like our tendency, like you pointed out like maybe 10 minutes ago, was to say that mushrooms and humans alike will trend towards and seek efficient solutions for things. And so like a question that I would put to our audience is, where do you see an inefficiency and what elements of centralization are being employed there? And how might those elements of centralization be replaced by decentralized smaller nodes, smaller actors, smaller processors that perform the same vital function but do a better job because you're distributing the work? That'd be
Yeah.
a question. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to bring this into a real world example as well, we talked about this a couple podcasts ago, but there was a fire at the farmers market in Charlottetown, PEI, and like the building was out of commission. I don't know the time frame of it being able to come back online or not, but you had this point of failure, and then there's a situation of like, where do we go? What are those other nodes? How do we get back to work immediately? Do I have to go to Google and look through real estate listings and scramble to find somewhere? Or is there visibility on those existing nodes immediately? And that's the vision for FoodWeb, right? Is, oh, shoot, like we need a place. Okay, there might not be a place that big immediately tomorrow because big venues are usually customized and it's going to take time. But are there like two smaller places that could be rented immediately to get like the weekend right after? Like those market vendors have no lost days of work at all because there was like 74 places you could rent on FoodWeb, and over here is a cold storage fridge. I can leave the stuff because the place I need to rent doesn't have a walk-in fridge, and it's not perfect and it's patchwork, but it's there. And to look at our core offering, the first thing we've released is our kitchen rental marketplace. You can rent a kitchen for $30 an hour, right? If you go to foodweb.network/kitchens, there's 6 kitchens there for rent right now. And with some of the food businesses I've talked to, $30 an hour might be expensive for you, but what it means is you can get started today, right now, use the infrastructure, build your business up to the point where you can go and sign a lease and rent your own spot. But because there is this decentralized network, your capacity to just get going using infrastructure, you're now in the economy and the flow of resources. And the more of us that can start using this network, there's more resources available. It's faster, it's more accessible, and you can just do your thing. And you don't need to be out there searching and searching. We're building that coordination layer to make it fast, make it efficient.
Yeah, so I want to hone in on one point there, which is that mycelium is both a layer that coordinates the sharing of resources or the trading of resources in an economical way, but it also does that with regard to communication, right? It's not just the sharing of resources, it's also the sharing of information. And that's also what FoodWeb is set to do. You don't get to understand that there's another place to sell your goods as a farmer unless you have that information sharing component, right? It's actually, right? If we talk about the way that the internet's built, first, the internet is an information sharing protocol. Then Bitcoin comes along in 2009, and that's a value sharing protocol. That's an economic internet. So, like with regard to mycelium networks, it's first an information transfer protocol. They need to know where to send the resources, and they need to be able to communicate with the bugs and the insects and the plants and the rest of the connected elements of the network in order to know where to ship off the various, who's got too much, who's got too little, right? And what are you willing to trade for that? That it facilitates that only because it's an information network first and then a like a value sharing network second, which I just think is epic and fascinating. If you're interested in learning more about that, like there's the book that I'd point you to is Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. And Merlin Sheldrake's dad deserves a little bit, actually. First, Merlin Sheldrake's brother deserves a ton of credit. Cosmo Sheldrake, just a shout out name, like Cosmo. Wow. His music's incredible, and he applies biomimicry to music. All right. And biomimic, like he goes and samples a bunch of sounds from nature. So he'll go and mic a fruiting mushroom and capture the sound it makes when it explodes, and then he'll amp that up and use that in a song. Right? It's, dude, that more of that. How do I just get more of that? Okay, and then yeah, Merlin Sheldrake. We'll circle back around to him, but Rupert Sheldrake is the pioneer. He's a legit scientist. He's an old dude now, friends with Terence McKenna, but he's the pioneer of a theory. It's called morphic resonance. And morphic resonance is like a term used to, coming full circle here, refer to the earth consciousness, right? There's this invisible information field that nature uses to communicate with each other, with the things in nature use it to communicate with one another. And since then, his theory has been vindicated in innumerable ways, dozens of ways. It comes to mind. It's where plants will release pheromones. And so if a tree is being eaten upstream or upwind and it's being eaten by a deer, it'll release pollen or a pheromone or some sort of communication method to the trees downwind, telling the trees to up its bitterness because you're about to get eaten. And it's like, what? Wait, it does what? Like, that is the definition of intelligence right then and there. And we don't need to really invoke the notion of a brain. It's like the brain is happening at this morphic resonant field at a higher level that we don't comprehend. And we don't really have the right to decide that that's not a brain or a consciousness or an entity of some sort. Like,
Oh,
who are
100%.
we to say? Yeah.
There's another book that I wanted to
And then
recommend for it.
yeah, go
But
ahead.
just to add to that, another book recommendation, I forget the author's name, but it's called What a Plant Knows. And by, just looking it up here, Daniel Kamovitz. This book it's crazy. Like, I read 3 or 4 pages and I'm like, whoa, I need to integrate this for a month. It's specific to plants. It's not bringing in as much of this like mycelial coordination layer, but it runs through the 5 human senses and compares what that sense would be like for plants. So like, we have eyes that respond to light stimuli. Like, that's sight is brain computing light stimuli. Like, I see this 3D object because the light's reflecting blah blah blah. Like, it's just scanning that. The way plants respond to stimuli is more sophisticated and not concentrated in one spot, the eyes. It's distributed, and like different parts of the plant respond in different ways, and then smell and then taste and blah blah blah. And this book will allow you to understand just how remarkable these organisms are. Like, if you don't believe in some sort of intelligent creator behind the scenes of existence, this book will make you believe in God. Like, whatever God means, like whether it's the mushroom or Sky Daddy, I'm not sure, but What a Plant Knows for plants and Entangled Life for fungi, like those two things, like, just to understand what's happening, oh my goodness, it's just incredible. Like, nature is incredible. It is insane what them organisms are up to. And while you were talking about Entangled Life, like, I pulled this off the shelf and I opened it, and like, I have a bunch of scribbles and notes inside. And the page that I opened to was there was a star here, and it says, in simple terms, plants are socially networked by fungi. This is what I mean by the wood wide web, right? Like, the mushrooms in many ways are like the internet for the natural world, as we said at the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah, and there's a number of fun words that we can employ there. I like one phrase that came to mind earlier in life was brain forest, right? Every tree is a neuron that communicates and can communicate with every other tree in very much so a brain kind of way. I bet if you mapped out, actually, have you seen those like topographical, like ultraviolet, like recordings of rainforests? They pulse, eh? Like they have a heartbeat. It's wild, dude. So I'm like personally so excited about people getting passionate about nature and applying all of the rad technology that we have in today's day and age to further understand nature, because if we can leverage that understanding and then biomimic it and pull that into more of the things we're designing and building, I think that is a way for us to map our trajectory out of this pseudo messy situation that we're in. We're in a weird place. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how to chart the course, nor should I, right? I'm one dude. But all of this is to say that we do need answers. And maybe the mushroom has the answers. Maybe the answers are right in front of us, and we just need to look and observe and pay attention and slow down, right? Because nature's not in a rush. There's a quote in Taoism, and it goes something like this: in nature, nothing is done, but everything is accomplished. And it's, oh damn. If you take a look at nature and like freeze frame, like something happening, a river, an ant moving across it, could you even put words to what's happening there in like an action? No, not really. Like you can't really describe in any one way like how that wind is affecting the forest right now, but everything's being accomplished in the present moment, right? The fungal network is not like pulling money from the future in debt terms and like trying to bring more progress into the present, right? It's just, oh, I guess the resources I have is what I got, and I'm gonna figure out how to equalize and find an equilibrium here. I'm on a rant, man. Here, bring me back in.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of things as we do on this podcast. I think we're like 1/3 practical, 1/3 like economic education, and 1/3 philosophy. And I love that about these conversations. But to bring it in, let's just spend the last couple minutes here grounding in the philosophy in a food web sense. Like food web's a company. We have a mission. We need customers. We need to do the thing. And so let's just bring it in, and the mushrooms run the show. Like we started this to be like, okay, like why is our logo what it is? We touched on that. Like we get that mushrooms out there in nature are doing a whole bunch of stuff. But let's just like really bring it home. And as CTO of this company, like how do the mushrooms run the show internally? Like how is that biomimicry taking place in a practical capacity in our actual offerings?
Yo, that's a question. That's a real question. Okay, so I would say that rather than our technology at this stage mimicking and bringing in biomimicry, I would say that the biomimicry exists in our foundation more than anything else, our ethos, the ethics that you and I, like bond over and have aligned on as founding pillars on which to build the company FoodWeb. That's where the biomimicry shows up. As I was saying that, I can point to the whole decentralized model, the Airbnb of kitchens, right? That's biomimicry as well. That's take any one kitchen out of the equation, you've still got a kitchen near you to rent. Like that if we can make just that vision come to fruition, then we've succeeded in mimicking a decentralized network of kitchens. But okay, the ethos. We don't want to steal and exploit people. That's like pretty fundamental to how we're running this business. If we ever do, that's bad. And we need to take a look at ourselves and have a conversation with the mushroom gods, because we screwed up at some point along the road if we find ourselves doing that. So I'm going to keep you accountable. You're going to keep me accountable. We're going to build things and build the company in such a way that we stay true to those fundamental ethos and ethical pillars. How would you answer that question there, sir?
Think for me, I think about the roadmap of all of the things we want to put out there, right? Anybody that gotten to know what we're trying to do here at FoodWeb, like the kitchen rental app was just the lowest hanging fruit. Pun absolutely intended. It's just, I love that. All the food analogies that we use in our day-to-day vocabulary are just so perfect. I notice them more now that we're in it, but we had to start somewhere. We haven't made any like social media announcements, so this is a fun thing. If you're tuning in, you'll get the first reveal of this. But if you go to foodweb.network/map, version 1 of our map is available. You can see on that map anything from a farmer's market to a not-for-profit to a distributor to a grocery store to a restaurant to a cafe. The map says there's only 600 and whatever data points available. There's actually, as you toggle certain things on and other things off, there's actually like thousands and thousands. We're building. This is V1. It's like next week it might look different than what it looks like now, but we're slowly rolling out these other tools. And just the mushrooms are moving resources and electrical signals and deciding what needs to be where. Like FoodWeb, like there's a reason it's not like Kitchen Web and it's a kitchen app. Like it's FoodWeb because we're connecting all of these components. Like one day in the near-ish future, emphasis on the ish, there will be discussion forums on the website. We have an events page now. If you go on the event page, it's events we're doing, but it's also events other people are doing. We're building a network, right? And we're creating visibility into more than just kitchens. We're building visibility into all of it, like the whole thing, like the whole food system. If there's a piece of the food system we haven't identified to create visibility on, let us know and we'll build that. And it's some things will be ready before other things. And that's just the nature of how this is being rolled out. But the mission here is to create not just visibility, but usability of everything. If you wanted to store 18 crates of strawberries in a walk-in fridge in Nova Scotia, good luck. You're going to have to cold call a bunch of places. One day on foodweb.network, you'll be able to not only rent a kitchen by the hour, but you'll be able to rent a walk-in fridge by the hour, and you'll be able to rent space on a truck going from here to New Brunswick by the day, or whatever the unit economics of that are. Like, we're building a network that's facilitating the flow of information and the flow of resources across the